I'm 28. I live in Vancouver. I work as an engineer for a construction company. Since I was a child, my parents and I lived in an old but cozy house in the new Westminster neighborhood. It was a real house, not an apartment, but a house with a garden, a wooden porch, and an old oak tree in the yard, on which my swing used to hang. The house came to my mother from her mother, my grandmother, back in 2008. When I turned 18, my mother officially added me as a co-owner, 50-50. She said it was for security, so that in case of something, I would have a guarantee of the house, which had always been a symbol of stability for me. We never discussed selling. On the contrary, my mother always said, "This is our home. This is your childhood. This is where we will stay forever." I believed her. I even planned to return here one day after working abroad, maybe with the children. 3 weeks ago, I returned from a 2-month trip to Japan. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up to my house was a big sold sign on the lawn. I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe my neighbor had sold his house. But no, the sign was right in front of our driveway. I walked into the house. It was almost empty. There was no furniture. The pictures on the walls were gone. Even the rug my grandmother had brought from Iran was gone. My mother was sitting in a folding chair in the empty living room, her laptop on her lap. "What's going on?" I asked. She looked up and said, "I sold the house." I stood there, unable to understand. "How could you? We're co-owners. You had no right to sell it without my signature." She replied calmly, "I did everything officially. The notary checked all the documents. You had a chance to give up your share, but you didn't answer the letters. I was in Japan. I didn't get any letters. The letters were sent to your mailbox here, at your home address, and to your email. I sent you 4 messages. I checked my email. One was in spam. The others were sent 3 months before I left, but not marked urgent or important. I just didn't pay attention." "That doesn't mean you had the right to do it," I said. "We could have discussed it. It was my house, too." "I had debts," she said. "Lots of debts. Loans, medicine, finally. I couldn't pay the taxes on this house anymore. Selling it was the only way to survive." I sat down on the floor. I didn't cry. I just couldn't believe that all this was real. "Where are you moving to?" "I have a temporary place to stay. My other friend invited me." "And me?" She looked at me. "You're an adult. You have a job. You have money." "But it was my house," I said quietly. She didn't answer. I went out. I sat down on the sidewalk, under the same oak tree that I had swung on as a child. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely outcast. And now I don't know if there's anything I could do legally. Did she have the right to sell the house when I was a co-owner? Or did I just lose everything because I didn't open the letter? I didn't talk to my mother for 3 weeks after that night. I wasn't angry. I was empty. It was as if someone had cut a piece of the past out of my memory. I couldn't even go back to the apartment I rented downtown. Everything there was temporary, without a personal imprint. There was no furniture that I had chosen, no walls with photos from my childhood hanging on them, no home. But after a few days, I realized, if I didn't do anything, I would just accept it. And I couldn't accept it. Not because I had been cheated on, but because I had been turned off. It wasn't just a house. It was the place where I first learned to ride a bike, where my grandmother taught me how to make cinnamon rice, where I cried after my first breakup. And she just put it all up for auction like old furniture. I went to a lawyer. I was referred to a firm that specialized in real estate and family disputes. The lawyer, Linda Chun, listened to me in silence, then asked for documents. I brought my passport, my proof of ownership, and electronic copies of the letters my mother said she had sent. She looked through everything carefully. "Technically," she said, "your mother had the right to sell the house, even if you were a co-owner. Under British Columbia law, if 2 owners have equal shares, one can file a petition in court to divide the property or sell it if there is no agreement. But there is a caveat." I held my breath. She should have officially notified you of her intention to sell, and that notification must be substantiated with proof that you received it. Simply sending a letter through the post office is not enough if it has gone into spam or was sent to an address you don't check regularly, especially if you have been abroad. What about emails? They should clearly state that it concerns property and give you 30 days to respond. If you don't respond, it's assumed that you don't object. But if you can prove that you didn't receive the notice in time, for example, because you were away on business, didn't have access to the mail, or the letters were sent while you were away without further communication. Then there's a chance to challenge the agreement. A chance? Isn't that a guarantee? No, but we can file a complaint in court to cancel the agreement or demand compensation, especially if you can prove that she acted improperly. For example, withholding information or not try to find you in person. I asked if I could at least get my share of the money. Yes, even if the agreement isn't canceled, you're entitled to 50% of the amount after expenses. But here's another problem. Did she even give you the money? I didn't know. We didn't even talk about money. Linda said the first thing to do was to demand a written explanation from Mom, copies of the sale documents, and details of how the money would be distributed. If she refused, then go to court. I wrote Mom a letter. Not a letter, but a personal one. I wrote on a piece of paper the way Grandma used to write us notes. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just wrote. I don't want to fight, but I have a right to know the truth. How was the house sold? How much did it cost? Where did the money go? And why didn't you call me when it all started? I took the letter to her temporary apartment. 2 days later, she called. I'll be there, she said. She arrived with a folder. She looked older. Tired. I didn't want to drag you in, she said. You were always busy. I didn't want to bother you with my problems. But it's not just your problem, I replied. It was my house, too. She opened the file. The house had sold for $1.4 million. After commissions, taxes, and expenses, she was left with about $1.1 million. She had paid $600,000 toward her debts, loans, medical bills, insurance. Another $200,000 for her new home and moving. And she had set aside $300,000 for me. I wanted to leave you the money, she said. I thought it would be better than sharing an empty house. But you didn't ask. I was afraid you would say no, that you wanted to keep the house and I wouldn't be able to pay the taxes, that we would lose it anyway, but with debt. I sat there thinking. It hurt, but I could see that she was suffering too. She wasn't angry. She was just trapped. I don't want money, I said. I want to know that you trust me, that I'm not just an additional owner on the papers, that I'm part of the family. She started crying. We didn't decide everything then, but we started talking. I invited her over. She brought one of the old frames, a picture of the three of us in front of the house when I was 10. I still don't know if we're going to go to court. Linda says we can work out a settlement, amicably. But the main thing I've learned is that sometimes the biggest loss isn't the place. It's the feeling of not being heard. And now I'm just trying to get that feeling back. I didn't rush into making a decision. The lawyer sent a formal proposal, demands to return the $550,000 of the sale price, mine from the house. She wrote that if Mom doesn't respond within 30 days, we'll sue. But I asked for a delay. I don't want this to end in paperwork, rumors, and an even bigger rift between us. I want to know, can we fix what's broken? A week later, I invited Mom to lunch. Not at a cafe, but at my place. I bought a table, a shelf, and hung a frame with our childhood photo. We ate rice with cinnamon, just like Grandma used to make. She looked at me. Do you remember the recipe? I found it in her book. She nodded, and tears welled up in her eyes. We talked for a long time, not about money, but about how everything went wrong. It turned out she had been quiet about her financial problems for years. She was afraid I would judge her. She had taken out loans for her medications because she didn't have full insurance after retirement. Property taxes had gone up, and she couldn't afford them. I thought selling was the only way to keep you out of debt, she said. If we didn't sell, the bank could take the house, and then you'd be left with nothing. I wanted you to have some money, but you didn't tell me. You made the decision for both of us. Yes, and I was wrong, not in selling, but in not taking your hand. We were silent for a long time. Then I said, I don't want a trial, but I want you to sign a formal agreement. To make it clear, 50% is mine, and you're paying it back, not as a debt, but as an acknowledgement that I was a part of it. She nodded. I came back gradually. I have a plan. I got a job at the library, and I don't waste money. We made a simple agreement. No court. The lawyer prepared the document. We signed it with a notary. She promised to return the $550,000 over 5 years, without. A month later, she sent the first payment, $5,000, along with a letter. Thank you for not giving up on me. This was the most important decision of my life. Not selling the house, but not calling you first. I put the letter in a drawer and started looking for a new place. I found an old house in Port Moody, 2 bedrooms, a small grove, a veranda. It was in bad shape, but it had character. I bought it with my savings, partly using the first money my mother gave me back. I fixed it up myself. Every Saturday, for a few hours. Replaced the floor, painted the walls, planted a young maple tree. But one day, when I was removing the old wallpaper in my office, I found something behind it. An envelope, with my name on it. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a letter from my grandmother, dated 2010, and inside was a truth I didn't expect. The letter was handwritten in ink on yellowed paper. It began with the words, "If you're reading this, the house is no longer ours. And maybe your mother did something you don't understand. But I want you to know the truth." Then came something that changed everything. Grandma wrote that she never wanted this house to become a burden. She knew it wasn't just an inheritance, it was a burden. She had seen it destroy the relationship between my mother and grandfather through renovations, taxes, neighbors. And so, when she passed it on to her daughter, she made one condition. If you ever feel like this place is destroying your family, sell it. And don't hesitate. It's not the house that's important. It's the people. And then she wrote about me. "I want you to know, I didn't leave you a house. I left you memories. And if you ever lose one, don't let it destroy the other. You've always been sensitive, warm-hearted. And I'm afraid that when this house is gone, you'll lose the belief that you have value. But you're not valuable because you have a share in the house. You're valuable because you are my blood, my love, my heritage." The letter ended with a simple sentence. Don't let stones define who you are. I sat on the floor, holding the paper in my hands, and cried. Not because it was hard, but because suddenly everything became clear. Grandma knew. She had foreseen this moment. And she had already given me the answer 20 years before I even realized what I was losing. The next day I called my mother. I asked her to come. She arrived with anxiety in her eyes. I silently handed her the letter. She read it by the window in the sunlight. When she was done, she closed her eyes. "I didn't know she wrote it," she said. "She told me to keep the condition, but she never said she left the letter for you. She only wanted me to know when I needed to." Mom looked at me. I didn't sell the house because I wanted to get rid of the past. I sold it because I was afraid it would destroy us. I saw how you became less open when we started talking about taxes, about renovations. I saw how tired you were growing. And I remembered what Mom had told me. Don't let your home become the enemy of your family. I just didn't know how to tell you. We were silent for a long time. Then I said, I thought I'd lost my home, but maybe I had just found it again. Not on the walls, but in this letter. In you. In us. She hugged me. Long. Like the first time in years. A week later, I invited her to my first evening in the new house. I cooked rice with cinnamon. I put my grandmother's old plate on the table. We sat on the veranda, drinking tea, watching the sun set behind the grove. It's beautiful, she said. It has a soul. I want you to have a room here, I said. Not forever, but so you know, this is your place. She smiled through her tears. Thank you. I didn't go to court. The lawyer agreed to close the case because we had reached an agreement. Mom continues to pay back the money, regularly, gradually. But now it's not a debt. It's a symbol. Trust. Correction. Sometimes I still think about the old house. The oak tree, the swing, the window from which I watched the rain. And it hurts, but not like before. Now it's a memory, not a loss. I've learned that sometimes the greatest thing we can keep from the past isn't a place. It's an understanding. That people are more important than walls. That trust is more important than property. And that sometimes the hardest thing to do is choose a person over a principle. And now, as I sit on the porch of my new home with a cup of tea, I know this is not the end. This is the beginning. And maybe that's how my grandmother imagined her legacy would live on.